Now we want to talk about a different method for factoring called factoring by grouping. A lot of times we use this method when we have 4 terms, and it's going to be helpful for us for quadratics in the next video. So let's say that we had something that was 45a cubed plus 9a squared plus 15a plus 3. And we needed to factor this. If we go back to what we've learned before, one thing that we could do is we could take out the greatest common factor, which the greatest common factor here would be a 3. So we could take the 3 out, and when we take the 3 out, this becomes a 15a cubed plus a 3a squared plus a 5a plus 1. So there's one thing that we could do. But since it has 4 terms, I'm wondering if it can be factored further. And the method that I use would be factoring by grouping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split up my terms. I'm going to group the first 2, and then I'm going to group the last 2. So I'm going to forget about this 3 for a second and just kind of leave it on the outside and just look at this inside stuff. So if I group the first 2, what do they have in common? Well, they have a 3 in common, and they also have an a squared in common. If I take out a 3a squared, that's going to leave me with a 5a plus 1. Remember, I should be able to check myself by going backwards. So if I take this 3a squared and distribute it, I should get what I started with. 3a squared times 5a is this 15a cubed right here. And 3a squared times 1 is this 3a squared. So I'm feeling pretty good. Then what I do is I kind of drop down this plus sign, and I say, what do the last 2 terms have in common? Well, to me it doesn't look like they have anything in common, so I'm just going to say they have a 1 in common, which leaves me with a 5a plus 1. I'm going to stop for a second and ask myself if both of my parentheses are the same. If both of my parentheses are the same, then I'm about to be successful factoring by grouping. If they're not the same, then either I did something wrong or I'm not going to be able to factor this by grouping. So I'm going to go down to my next line. And remember, I still have this 3 on the outside, so I'm going to leave it there. Okay, so you see how this 5a plus 1 in both of these parentheses? This is going to be one of my factors, 5a plus 1. My other factor is going to be what's left over. So I took out the 5a plus 1. Really, I factored it out because both of these terms had a 5a plus 1 in common. So I took it out, just like I took the 3 out to begin with. And what's left over when I take it out is I have a 3a squared, and I have a plus 1. So I think in the factored form, this is a 3, 5a plus 1, 3a squared plus 1. All right, let's do another one. So let's say that I had x cubed minus 4x squared plus 8x minus 32. And I need to factor that. Well, they don't have anything in common. None of the coefficients have factors in common. None of the terms have a common variable. There are 4 terms though, so I'm going to think about factoring by grouping, which means I group the first 2 and I group the last 2. What do the first 2 have in common? Well, the first 2 have an x squared in common. When I take out an x squared, that leaves me with an x minus 4. Remember, I should be able to check myself if I go backwards. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times a negative 4 is negative 4x squared. I'm going to bring down this plus sign. What do the last 2 have in common? They have an 8 in common. When I take out that 8, I get an x minus 4. Remember, I'm going to stop and ask myself, are both my parentheses the same? If they are, great, I can go on. If they're not, either I did something wrong, maybe I didn't take out the greatest common factor, or maybe I made a mistake multiplying or dividing. Or it's possible that the original polynomial just can't be factored using grouping. Mine are the same, so I'm going to keep going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor again. Both of these terms have an x minus 4 in common, so I'm going to take out an x minus 4. When I take out an x minus 4, I'm left with an x squared plus 8. And this is going to be my final answer right there. All right, let's try one more. Let's say that I had 20n cubed plus 5n squared plus 60n plus 15. Okay, the first thing I like to ask myself is, do I have anything in common? And remember, on the first problem I did and the second problem I didn't. Do I have anything in common here? Well, I think that I have a 5 in common, and I can take that out. So what I'd like you to do right now is pause me and try this problem. Look back at the first problem we did and see if you can follow each of those steps to get to an end answer that's in factored form. So pause me. Do it. Okay, so I factored this problem by grouping. I first took out the 5, and when I did that, I got 4n cubed plus n squared plus 12n plus 3. I left the 5 on the outside, looked at the first two terms, they had an n squared in common, took that out. Looked at the last two terms, they had a 3 in common, took that out. I noticed that I had the same thing inside both my parentheses, so I felt pretty confident about going forward. I knew that I still had this 5 on the outside. I knew that one of my parentheses would be 4n plus 1, and then my other parentheses was made up of what was left over. So my actual answer is going to be 5 times 4n plus 1 times n squared plus 3. And I just want to remind you that on a quiz or a test, you could check your answer because you could multiply the parentheses and then you could distribute the 5 back in.